I'd like to show you the parts of the instrumentation for the hinge axis recording system made by AD2. These are the side arms. There's a right and a left. This is the crossbar for the lower member. This is that crossbar. This is a clutch assembly here, and I might give credit to Dr. Ted Freeland, who developed this clutch assembly system. It works great. It's better for the patient, better for the doctor. These are flags where we record the actual movement pattern of the patient, and these flags fit onto the flag plates here. These flag plates fit on the flag assembly, and then we have the large and small hex wrenches. We have stylus pins, right and left stylus pins, and we have the writing pencils with a red lead and black lead. We have a graph here which allows you to measure the angle of the eminence, and a ruler to measure the millimeters, an elastic strap, and a Velcro system that supports the hinge axis flag assembly on the patient. And then we have discluders, and you'll see how these discluders work. And then we have our hinge axis mounting stand and 3 plastic rings that will be support plaster depending on how much plaster you need to build up to support your bite fork. So we have the 3 different sizes here. And this is the basically what you get when you order the hinge axis system. Let's look at the individual parts of the hinge axis system now and how they work. This is the flag assembly, and this is Nasion relator. This fits against Nasion, just like the Nasion relator on your estimated face boat. The side arms then will move in and out and back and forth. And then to tighten the side arm, you use your hand and tighten the position. The side arms will actually move back and forth, and you set them tight against the patient's face. And we first will assemble this the flag assembly, and these flag holders slip into the slot here and tighten. Make sure that it's good and tight. The curved portion of the flag assembly goes to the back. Get it good and tight. And now you'll place a flag and now then you support this on the patient by using a rubber band, either one of these rubber bands, and you hook the rubber band on the post here, and it goes over to this side, and that goes around the patient's back of the head and supports the anterior posterior position of the flag assembly. You want to support the vertical position of the flag assembly, and so you use these Velcro straps to do that. The Velcro strap, you have 2 places depending on the size of the head where you hook the Velcro strap. And so we could hook one here, one on the opposite side, and then they would go up over the patient's head, and that then supports the vertical position of the flag assembly. So you have the Velcro straps holding it in this vertical position like this. This is a rubber band holding it in an anterior posterior position. And this is where you would set up your flag assembly on the patient. I'm going to show you how the clutch assembly and holder is set in order to make the clutch that will fit on the patient's lower teeth. We use the side arm. You notice the side arm here has a cutout area here that fits. And so this would be how you would be set up to make your actual clutch. Your patient model goes here, lower model of the teeth, and then you would adapt Biocryl to it. This is a finished product here. You can see the lower model with the Biocryl adapted, and then we use self-curing acrylic and adapt the clutch holder to the self-curing acrylic. And so this is a finished product ready to take off of the model, put on the patient's teeth. These are discluders, and this would be, you determine how many of these you need, what kind of thickness you need here that the patient's anterior teeth would fit here, and as they move side to side, no posterior teeth would touch, and that's the reason it's called a discluder. It discludes the posterior teeth so that they don't touch the clutch when you move. And so this would be the lower clutch assembly ready to put on the patient. Take it off the model, put it on the patient. Okay, I want to show you how to make the lower clutch. This is a very important step in preparing your instrumentation for your hinge axis recording. The first thing that you want to do is get a very accurate model of the lower teeth, and usually going to the distal of the lower first molars is adequate extension. After I get a good lower model, I want to mark the cervical area on the facial and the lingual of the lower model. I want to locate the central fossa of the lower first molars. And now I want to be able to transfer that location to the back of the model. And so when you do a clutch, make your clutch, you want it just a horseshoe shape of the lower teeth, not a base. And so to transfer and find that central fossa of the lower first molar, draw a line up with the central fossa, draw a line down to the base of the model on the buccal and the lingual on both sides. Draw a line and draw a line down, and then come over and locate those lines, and then you can measure and locate the central fossa of the lower first molar. Mark the midline, come down and mark it on the lower model so that you now have the midlines lined up, midline line on the lower model and the central fossa on the lower first molars on the bottom of the lower models. The next thing that you do is you adapt a Biocryl base. I use 2mm Biocryl from Great Lakes, and I use the Biostar, and I adapt the Biocryl and cut off the excess at the cervical margins, buccal and lingual. Here they're extended back to the second molars, but I'll cut some of that off later. And now then we're ready to begin to make attach this Biocryl form of the lower teeth to our actual clutch assembly that we'll use on the patient. And to do that, the first thing I want to do is take the plate that is used and put some thin coating of Aquaphor in the area where I'm going to use quick cure acrylic. And I like to use the crossbar at the same time because it helps me kind of judge symmetry. So I put the crossbar in place. This screw will actually go on the bottom to hold the plate. So you want to hold the plate in place like this. And so I have to turn this over and attach the plate. Now these two screws should be screwed all the way in, And you do that before you put your crossbar in. You check, make sure these screws are screwed all the way in so you have extension, because your self-curing acrylic is going to attach itself to these two screws, and that's what actually holds in the biacryl of the lower teeth. And it would work like this. You can see on the flag assembly, there's a midline, and then lines equidistant from the midline. We use these lines to line up the center of our lower model and to get our central fossa, lower first molars, equidistant from the midline. So we use these lines to help make that judgment. And so it would fit on like this. And then I got the center lined up, but I have to look at the lower first molars now and judge those lower first molars in relation to the lines here, and making sure they're the right distance. Now, if I want to be even more critical, I can put a ruler on here, line it up with the center line, and see if I'm about equidistant. And then you have your quick cure acrylic added to attach the two. So your quick cure acrylic, the screw holds the quick cure acrylic to the biacryl base and to the clutch frame. When you work with acrylic, always be sure and wear gloves to protect your hands. You will develop a reaction to the acrylic, an allergy to the acrylic. Just get in the habit of wearing gloves all the time. And the other thing, when you're working with your acrylic, if you put a little Aquaphor on your gloves, it helps to keep the acrylic from sticking to the gloves so much. So, okay, now I want to wet the acrylic from K9 to K9, or wet the biacryl from K9 to K9. We'll add a little of the acrylic to that area, K9 to K9. And now I want to add some to the screws, making sure I get the screws surrounded good. Now I want to center the model, move it in again so that the screws touch the biacryl, and center it, looking at the first molars. Now then add a little more acrylic as needed. Okay, now then we just let that set. The next thing that we want to kind of finish up with is we've made our clutch here, and so let's just take it apart. And you see now we've got excess acrylic, and we have to go in and cut away the excess acrylic, use sandpaper, and smooth it all up and clean it up. So that's the way you go about making your clutch for your patients. You can see that the acrylic now blends in nicely with the biacryl base, and by using a burr and wet and dry sandpaper, you can get rid of the rough edges, round it over nice on the edges so that it's nice and smooth and comfortable to the patient. You want the patient to have a positive reaction. Now notice how it blends in very nicely, and that's our finished product. To accomplish that, after this is set, I would use carbide double crosscut burrs, leave a nice smooth surface, and then you can use some wet and dry sandpaper, and you can make this very, very smooth so the patient has a very positive reaction. And so that's the way you make your lower clutches. Let me demonstrate to you how the side arms work, and we're going to pretend that this is the actual patient's lower jaw here, with the clutch seated on the patient's lower teeth and the crossbar in place. But first, let's look at the side arms. This side arm is for the right side. You can see the red indicates right, green indicates left. So we have a right and left side arm. Now then, in looking at the side arm, you can see a mark here, here, and here. These two extremes, that is how far this arm will move anterior posteriorly. In other words, this screw assembly here moves the whole assembly in and out. You can see how it is moving. See how far it's moved? If I keep moving it, it'll move all the way to here. And if I go the other direction, so for a big patient, I have to move the side arm like this. And so this determines the location of the stylus pen on the patient. When I start with the patient, I like to start with it centered on the middle mark here. The next thing is, if you look at the two white plastic pieces here, I want to see equal amounts of the white plastic when I place it on the patient. Because what we're going to do is that this actually adjusts the vertical position of the stylus, and if I move here, you can see the difference now? So this changes the vertical dimension of the stylus pen, which you'll see in a moment. And when I start out, I like to have these two equal. And then this is an actual lock by changing this screw and moving it this. Let me get it back in position. Now then, I cannot change the vertical. So once I locate the actual vertical dimension I want, then I'll lock it in position. Now the side arm, also we have a stylus pen. This is a stylus pen, and it has a sharp point and a dull side. We've referred to the black part as a bullet. The bullet has a collar on it, which means that you can move it in. You can seat it only to the maximum of the collar. The collar runs into it, and that's as far in as it will seat. And again, right side, right side. It has millimeter marks on it, and those marks will be used later on to measure the immediate side shift. The point goes in toward the patient, and if we set up the left side to be the same way, green and green all the way, and lock it in position so that it doesn't move in or out. Now, the side arms would actually fit on the crossbar on the patient's lower jaw, like so. And you use the Allen head hex wrench and tighten the side arm in a fixed position. The writing pencil, you take lead and put into the writing pencil, and the writing pencil then would fit on the side arm like so. And when the patient moves, the lead would actually draw the actual movement pattern of the patient on our flag assembly that I showed you earlier. To use the writing pencil, critical. It's a spring-loaded If I loosen the screw here, this goes in and out. When I use it, put it on the patient, I want to lock it in this position. You can load writing lead on the patient easier is to approach it from the back. And to do that, this metal part here has to be loose, and you slide it all the way through. There, you see. And then to hold it in position, hold the lead in position, you tighten the metal cap. And now your writing pencil then is ready to use. So I again want to emphasize the importance of having everything set up as much as possible before the patient ever comes in to see you. This is a benefit both to you, because you will be more efficient in your chair time, and also it'll be beneficial to your patient because the patient will be in the office a much shorter period of time. And one of the things that's extremely important is that the sidearm distance from the flag be set correctly so that the writing pencil will work correctly. And I would like to show you how that is done. I'm going to use the stylus pen from the right side. We know that it's from the right because the red matches the right on the red on the sidearm. And we set the stylus pen by setting it so that the stylus pen, the flat side will be toward the flag, toward the patient, and we'll set it so that it measures 2 millimeters, approximately 2 millimeters. You can see here that we have approximately 2 millimeters of distance here marked on the stylus pen. Then when we then set up the flag assembly for the right side, stylus pen goes in, lock it in position. Okay, I want to show you now what we've accomplished in doing that. If this flag assembly were on the patient and the sidearm, we would move the sidearm in until the flat part touched the flag assembly, and we would then lock that sidearm on our crossbar so that that distance has been established from the sidearm to the flag assembly. Once it's locked there, then we would reverse it and put the point toward the flag. But the important thing is I want to show you the importance of establishing that distance. Now I'm going to use the writing pencil to show you how the writing pencil works and why that distance is important. The writing pencil, we've already preloaded the lead, and you may remember that we load the easiest way to do this is to load the lead from the back. You have a very small part pointing out here. You can use a fine piece of sandpaper to sharpen the point a little, or a scalpel. And then when we get ready to put the writing pencil on the patient, we want to pull the writing pencil back. It's spring-loaded. You loosen it, you pull it back like so. Pull it back and lock it so that the writing pencil then can be inserted into the sidearm. The distance has been set. And now then when you get ready to do the actual writing on the patient, you hold the writing pencil here, release the spring, and gradually let the writing pencil go in until it touches the flag, and now the patient can move and do the recordings. And the spring, you see, being spring-loaded, the spring will keep the lead against the flag so that you'll get a recording of all the movements. The important thing is that when you release it, you don't release it like this because you may break the lead. When you release the spring tension, you let it go in slowly, touch the flag. and that's the reason that it's important. This distance now has been set so the writing pencil will work on the flag to record your movement patterns. Remember, in your office, your most important asset is your time. So you want to make a very, very efficient use of your time. And so if you've done your models and your wax bites the day before, then you can have all your instrumentation set up and ready to go the minute the patient walks in the door. For example, in doing the bite fork and placing the AccuBites, I have used a model to determine exactly where I want to place the bite tabs, and that makes it go much faster. I will do this one so that it'll be on the camera, but I've prepared 3 bite forks because we're going to be doing 3 different procedures here on this patient. And so having models ahead of time makes things go much faster. You also want to have your ear bow set up and ready to go. Remember, now this is your estimated face bow or ear bow. We have our orbital pointer, and when you're doing a hinge axis, you'll have an orbital pointer on both sides of the ear bow. This extra orbital pointer comes in the hinge axis kit. You want to put some finger cots, which I have here, on the ear, the part that goes in the patient ears. And our first thing we're going to do is take a natural head posture ear bow. And we're going to use this bubble here, this level, to determine when I have the face bow at an exact level position on the patient. In order, again, to have the face bow ready to go, have your Nasion relator in position. Remember that you have the slot here on the Nasion relator, and it goes in to this slot on your ear bow. Tighten it good. Bring the Nasion relator all the way back and then tighten it. Remember, the Nasion relator, the flat side of the Nasion relator has to be up so that this screw assembly will lock it in position against the flat side. This screw allows you to adjust the width of the ear bow. Be very careful. If you keep opening and closing, this screw gets looser and looser and it will fall apart. To actually make a movement of the face bow, ear bow, to change it only requires about a quarter of a turn. See, just that much, and I can move it. So don't really make it real loose, just a little quarter of a turn, and you can adjust the width. Now, we also want to have our bite fork assembly ready to go. On the bite fork assembly, there are the vertical post here, there are 2 areas, flat areas. One is longer than the other one. The one that is short goes onto the ear bow. And it fits into this hole here. So the vertical part of the bite fork assembly goes into that hole there, with the flat side toward the screw assembly here. Seat it all the way. We've seated the bite fork assembly into the ear bow, and as I said, this part now is even with the ear bow, and this will give us our 3rd reference point, the vertical dimension in the anterior segment. And if you take the orbital pointer and loosen it and move it over there, you'll see that the pointer comes out exactly the same level. Let me get it in the right position. See, the pointer comes out exactly at the same level as the vertical part of the bite fork assembly. So that establishes the third reference point, and this orbital pointer here. So our bite fork now, or our estimated face bow is ready, except for putting on the finger kites. I will show you how to now put the bite tabs on the bite fork, and we'll use. And I'm going to, for this, I'm going to remove my gloves and put new gloves on when the patient comes back. This is so that the sticky part of the bite tabs, the AccuBites, won't stick to my fingers as readily. So we know where we want to place the bite tab, the AccuBites, on our face bow, on our bite fork. So we peel off one of the AccuBites. Turn the corner a little bit. And we'll place the anterior section first. Looking at this one, we want to place it right on the midline. Like so. Notice the midline here. This midline on the bite fork has to line up with the patient's skeletal midline. And so we place the AccuBite right in the center of that midline. Now, looking at the posterior section, you see the AccuBite, we have one hole still back here. This would be on the 6-year molars. Place them with a little pressure, because what you're depending on, these AccuBites, the paper is sticky on the bottom. There's a glue on the bottom. This is very sticky. And so you're depending on the glue to hold the AccuBite onto the bite fork. I showed you a moment ago using the models to place the AccuBites onto the bite fork. If I don't have a model, then I've got to use my patient as my model. And so I'd have the bite fork without the AccuBites. And at the same time, I want to demonstrate to you how I place the bite fork. Always look at your patient facially. Close a little bit. Not the teeth at first. What you're looking for is the skeletal midline. Usually the fulcrum is a very good indicator of the skeletal midline. So don't look at the teeth yet, because sometimes the teeth can be off center. And so if you use a midline of the teeth, you may be way off center of the skeletal midline. So your first thing you do is you look at your patient facially and look at the fulcrum. See here, look here. And then look at the upper teeth, and you see the two line up. So she lines up, she's very symmetrical, lines up very nicely. So when I place my bite fork now, looking at the midline on my bite fork, I can look at the midline of the teeth. And that way I know I'm on the skeletal midline of the patient. And so to determine where I want to place my bite tab, my AccuBites, rotate it like this, set the midline of the bite fork on the midline of the teeth, and look and see where the first molars are on both sides. And then I know that I can place my first molars here at this hole, and my anterior bite in about this area here. So that's the way I would determine how and where to place my AccuBites. Now, the next thing I want to show you, though, because when I do the procedure, you may not get the full appreciation for it. And in taking and registering the teeth into the AccuBites, the upper teeth, I will place it the same. And before I touch the teeth, I'm going to get the midline lined up, and I've got my thumbs on the buccal face of the canine area, and then I can lift like this. I don't like to do it like this, where I don't have any feeling of where the teeth are in relationship to the bite fork. I like to feel the teeth and the bite fork at the same time. So I can put my thumbs on the buccal face of the molar, of the canines, line up the midline, and then I can seat against the teeth. Now, the next thing that is very important you'll see me do, we'll be using the water bath to soften the bite tabs. When the bite tabs are soft, remember now, they soften at about 120 degrees, so your water bath is a little warmer than that, so you have to be careful. So we put it in, and then I'll feel. When they feel soft, remember, you've also heated the metal. So I will come over to the sink, turn on the cold water, and I will run cold water over the bite fork. That cools the bite fork, but at the same time, it also cools the base of the compound, so that the soft part of the compound is only on the surface. The base of the compound is rather firm. So that helps to prevent me from overseating the bite fork too far onto the teeth and having the teeth touch the metal. When you take your bite fork, teeth only touch the compound. If they touch the metal, you have to do it again. Teeth only touch the compound. You cannot touch the metal with the teeth. That's another reason why I like to set the base of the compound to prevent me from overseating the bite fork and teeth hitting the metal then. So that's the procedure that I'll follow. In other words, I'll come in like this, get it positioned, and then I will lift. Like so. Up, and then just pop it off. Now, if you want to, you can use air and chill it a little bit before you pop it off. Not that important, really. So let's take one of the bite forks now. Okay. So first thing I have to do is soften it, and now I have to cool it all off and set the base of the compound. And then I will put it in ice water. Now, again, it is very important. Notice that I only have cusp tip indexing. The cusps are not seated deep into the compound. If they were seated deep into the compound, I've got to take a sharp scalpel and remove part of the compound. I will demonstrate that for you of what you have to do. That would be the very next step, is to get rid of the excess compound. But first I want to check it on the teeth to make sure that I did a good job. It goes to one place and it seats very firmly. To trim the wax, which we'll have to do in a few minutes, and also the compound, you want a very sharp scalpel. Be careful not to cut yourself. Now, I'm going to move over to the garbage can, because when you trim this compound, if it's hard, it flies all over the place and you'll make a mess. So if this were actually going to be trimmed, I would move over and get down right over the garbage can so I won't be making a mess, and I would trim away. Then wash it off. And we'll dry it good. Also wash your hand, your glove, because the compound is as I say, just kind of flies all over the place. Now, it's important that you trim the compound now, because in some instances, if the AccuBite doesn't stick good, and the patient, you've dismissed the patient, and you're in the lab working, and you realize, oh, I got to trim the compound. You may be trimming the compound, and the AccuBite comes off. Now, you got to call the patient back and do the whole procedure again. So make sure that you do all the steps one at a time and in the proper order to save your time and the patient's time. We're going to do another earbow procedure, only this time we're using the axis orbital plane. So we'll be using a nasion relator to position the anterior part of the face bow vertically. I'll be marking the orbital pointer and a couple other marks, which I'll explain later. But first I have to get my bite fork ready, the same as before. I just checked to see how soft the compound was. Chill the bite fork so it's not hot, and set the base of the compound. Put it against the teeth, line up the midlines. Chill it. Look at it and see if you need to trim the compound. This is pretty good cuss tip indexing. I will put it in the mouth again and look. I want to look and make sure that the teeth are not touching the bite fork anywhere. And that it fits stable. And I'm going to use Beauty Pink Extra Hard Wax on the bottom of the bite fork and have the patient close into it, and she will stay closed on it then, holding it against the upper teeth. But first I have to check and see where and how much Beauty Pink Extra Hard Wax to place. So I'll have the patient put my bite fork in, and I have the patient close, stop. Okay, now open, close, stop. Now close and touch the bite fork. Okay, now you see where it is, open, close, stop. We don't want to touch the bite fork. It's important not to touch the bite fork. So we'll close very slowly, and I'll stop you. And I want to see now how much wax and where to place it. Okay, close, very, stop, right there. So you can see in the anterior segment how much wax I've got to place here to hold so that she closes into it at that vertical dimension. So for this procedure, I use the Beauty Pink Extra Hard Wax. And I'll soften the entire sheet of wax. And then put it on the bottom of the bite fork. It is important that the pink wax stay in place because it is used to hold the condyles in central relation when the hinge axis face bow transfer is made. And take it and overlap the bite fork a little bit with the wax so it'll stay in place. See how I've overlapped? Now close slow, close, close slow, close slow, close slow, stop. Okay, hold it right there. Now air please, Christy. Allison, stay closed on this. Do not open. Hold it against your upper teeth. Do not let it come off your upper teeth. Stay closed, hold it against your upper teeth. Notice that I said that 3 or 4 times in different ways. I want to make sure the patient understands that we've got to keep this against the upper teeth with no movement whatsoever. Now stay closed on that, hold it against your upper teeth. Do not let it come off of your upper teeth. Now we get the ear bow and the hex wrench. And Christy will start putting it into the ears slowly as I seat it onto the bite fork stem. Okay, keep going toward the ears. Keep going. Tell me when you get there. Mm-hmm. Push it in. Mm-hmm. Push it forward. Mm-hmm. I lock it. I've locked the width. Notice how I am controlling the bite fork in the front, the bite fork assembly in the front with my left hand. Keeping this at right angles, this vertical, and trying to control the vertical dimension at the same time. Once we have it controlled, then I'm going to set Nasion relator. Let's see. I lock the width. Now I'm going to set Nasion relator. So I got to raise it a little bit, and I'm going to use it like a plunger. And I'm going to push and ask. Notice I've never let go of the bite fork assembly here, and I'm going to tighten the lower one first, then the vertical, and I'm trying to counteract the torque with my left hand. Now we have to do the marking of orbitali and the 3 points I need. So we'll loosen the orbital pointer and we'll move it over and put it directly under the inner canthus of the eye. Touch the skin. I can pull down on the cheek. Put a dot there and let go, and it goes right up underneath the orbital pointer. So this is registering the same vertical dimension as orbitali. Again, reach over, pull the cheek down, put a dot. I'll ask the patient, be sure and do not reach up and touch your face and rub those dots off. You'll see what the dots on the cheeks are for later on when we do our hinge axis. Now we can take the ear bow off, and so I will loosen. Okay, Christy, you'll take it out of the ear. Mm-hmm. I'll loosen the screw here on the front. Christy will open it out of the ears. I will ask the patient to open, and we will remove it. Now the next thing that I do is I take a look. I first check my bite fork. Did I keep it good and tight? Appears to be tight. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on, but I do put some pressure. I want to try to get as much as I can adjusted for the patient before I actually put the clutch on. Because once the clutch goes into the mouth, then I want to be able to move forward as fast as I can for the comfort of the patient. And so what we're going to do, Christy and I are going to just set the side arms first, or the flag assembly. And we're going to put it against Nasion, and I'm going to ask the patient to reach up and hold that firmly back against Nasion. against your face, and we're going to take the flag assembly then and move it forward so that it's going to cover the tragus of the ear, and then lock it firmly. Okay, now let go, Allison. Now then, I'm going to try the clutch in. And I have the clutch set up with the crossbar, and I have one thickness of discluder. And we'll see, first I have to check the fit of the clutch and the retention of the clutch. The clutch must fit very tight. Let me know if anything feels uncomfortable, sharp, or anything like that. Okay, close a little bit, stop, open a little bit. Fits good, nice and firm. Now then, I'm going to check the disclusion to see if I need more than one discluder. So I have the patient close on the anterior discluder, and I'm going to look at the posterior section and see how close the teeth are to the splint, or to the clutch. It looks like I'm going to need another discluder. If I can turn the patient a little toward me, and I don't know if you can get this on camera or not, but if you look at the posterior area, you'll see the teeth, upper teeth, are very close to the lower teeth. Now, that's too close. I'm pretty sure that as the patient starts moving right and left lateral movements, the posterior teeth are going to hit the clutch. So I'm going to add one more discluder to the anterior segment. When you do this procedure, be very careful. Control that screw. Don't drop it. So it might go into the patient's mouth. Okay. Now close for a minute. Oh, perfect. Now look at the posterior area. Okay, now I'm going to have the patient move to the right. Move to the right. Keep moving. Keep going. Keep going. Notice the posterior teeth. They're clearing the clutch very nicely. Now move to the left. And again, no contact in the posterior area. Okay. Now we'll put on the flag assembly. And I'll put one side on, Christy. You do the other one. First, we'll put the flag assembly on and bring the elastic around the patient underneath the base of the skull. And you put fairly good tension. Now then, you see it tends to pull down on the ears. So we've got to keep it off the ears and hold the vertical. So let's put it on the peg in front of the flag, Christy. Okay, now let me lift it off. You take both of them, and I'll lift it off the ears. When I get it off the ears, okay, now hook them together. Okay. Are you okay, Allie?
Yeah.
Now then, let's make sure we're tight against the face, Christy. So loosen this and just push the flag into the face firmly. And then tighten again. Okay. You want the flag assembly against the face as tight as you can get it. Now we're ready to put the sidearms on. And the first thing I do is I just take a quick look at the sidearm and judge where it is in relationship to the flag to see if I can make any gross movements before I actually put it onto the patient. This looks like it could go back a little bit. It's important that the sidearm be set at the proper distance from the flag assembly in order for the writing pencil to work when you start recording the movement pattern of the patient. And in order to set that distance, we use the stylus pen. And to do that, we're going to reverse the stylus pen and set the dull side toward the patient, that is, toward the flag. And we're going to set it so that it measures 2 millimeters. We'll see the 2 millimeter mark and lock it in position. so that we've now set the flat side of the stylus pen toward the flag assembly, and we've set it so that there's 2 millimeters extension. We're now going to insert that into the sidearm, lock it in position, and then you can see that when you have your sidearm on the crossbar and you move it in to touch the flag, that then sets the distance of the sidearm from the flag assembly, and now your writing pencil will work correctly. Then we'll move the sidearm in now until the dull part of the stylus pen touches the flag assembly. And the hinge axis is usually anywhere from 13, 14 millimeters in front of the tragus at about the middle to upper part of the tragus, so you can kind of approximate where it is and tighten your sidearm at that position. That's good. Now, release the stylus pen, that is that one. Release the stylus pen. Take it out, turn and put the point toward the flag. But don't lock it. Just leave it loose. Always be careful with the stylus pens. You don't want to drop them, especially onto a linoleum floor, because if you bend the point of the pen, you'll never locate the hinge axis. So you have to be very careful with the stylus pens. Okay, I'm just kind of looking at symmetry. It looks fairly symmetrical. I'm going to start on the left side to illustrate how you locate an axis. To do this, I want the stylus pen loose, and I want it to be able to touch the flag. I want to be able to have it move in and touch the flag. Okay, I want to illustrate how you locate an axis. When the patient will open and close, the stylus pen will move, and it'll form an arc of a circle. And so what we're trying to do is find the center of that circle. And depending on if the hinge axis point is above my stylus pen, then the stylus pen will make an arc like this, and I know then that I got to move the stylus pen up to get to the center of that circle. And you'll be surprised as to how far you move the stylus pen to locate the axis. I like to move it way too far the first time and actually go past the hinge axis point and then come back to it. Usually on a stabilized case, you can find the hinge axis in 3 movements, 4 at the very most. To do this, I'm not pushing or anything, I'm just feeling at pogonion, and I'm going to put my index finger under the gonial angle, and I'm going to put a slight lift on the gonial angle, and I'm going to reach up and touch the stylus pen with my thumb, touch it against the flag, and then remove my finger. And then I'll ask the patient to open slowly and to close. Now, I'm going to exaggerate it because you got to be able to see it. So I'm going to move the stylus pen quite a bit so that you can see the exaggerated curvature. Okay, now open again, please. Close. It moves like this. That means the center of that circle is up here somewhere. So I'm going to start adjusting the vertical. But as I go adjust the vertical, it comes forward some, so I automatically have to also adjust it posteriorly. Again, finger on the gonial angle, touch the pen against the flag, let go. Now open, please. Close. Now it made the same arc, only much, much smaller. Now I'm going to go way above it. Okay, now open, please. Close. Now it made an arc like this. Now then, I'm above and in front of the hinge axis. So I have to bring it down and go slightly posteriorly. I used the lines on the graph paper and relate the stylus, point of the stylus to those. When you get very close, you have to use the lines on the graph paper and the point of the stylus in relationship to a line to really know where you are and where you want to move. So again, same procedure. Feel the chin, finger under gonal angle, touch the stylus pen against the flag. Open, please. Close. Good, stop. Now I'm going to pull the stylus pen off the flag so that it won't tear the flag, and I'll do the right side. I want to complete locating the axis. Okay, I've located the axis, lock the vertical, double check, open. Fine. Now we're going to mark the axis on the flag. We're going to use red articulating paper, move in, and push the pen in, pull a little bit on the paper, and let's see. Open, now pull it out. Let's do it again. We got a red dot, but I want a little bigger red dot. Move the paper a little. Okay. There, you can see the red dot now. There, see where the pen is? There's a mark above it, but right at that dot. Okay, so we've located the axis on the flag. Now we want to do the tracing. Now that we've established the proper distance of the sidearm from the flag assembly, we want to use the writing pencil to show you how the writing pencil works. The writing pencil is spring-loaded, and if we release, you can see it moves in and out like this. When I actually put the writing pencil into the sidearm, I want to have it pulled all the way back, and I want to lock it in this position. Then put it into the sidearm, lock it in position, and now on the patient, the writing pencil would not quite touch the flag yet. And what we have to do is we want to release the spring assembly so that the lead will go against the flag, and then it will record the movement patterns of the patient. But to release that assembly, this spring assembly, you want to actually hold it and then let it go very slowly in and touch the flag. If you just loosen it and let it and release it like that, you may break the lead. So you want to just hold it, release it, and let it move in slowly. Now as the patient moves, the spring assembly will keep the lead against the patient. It'll be moving in and out with the patient's movement pattern. And that's the way the writing pencil will work. So we're going to use the black lead. Pull it back first and lock it. There, now lock it. Okay. Now lock the position. That one. Now unlock. Let it move in. Good. Okay. Now Ali, move straight forward. Keep going. Go back. Open big. Go back. All the way. Close all the way. Close all the way. Atta girl. Now then stop. Okay, put the red lighting pencil in. And we're going to do the orbiting, right orbiting in red. That way. Now then, move to your right, please, Allie. Keep your teeth together. Do it again. One more time. Go back, all the way back. Atta girl. Stop. Okay. Now take it out. That's good. Okay. We're going to line up the mark here that we made with when we did the estimated face bow, which is in the same plane as orbitally that we marked up by the nose. So we're going to mark orbitally. This is the height's orbitally, and we're going to line it up with the hinge axis point here, and we're going to draw a line across the flag. That is the axis orbital plane. So we're establishing the axis orbital plane on the flag. So I have to line the ruler up. Okay, Christy. We hit a hair. Okay. Now we've got the axis orbital plane in all our recording on the flag assembly. We're going to do measure the immediate side shift now. I've already measured the immediate side shift on the right side, so we're going to demonstrate it on the left side so that the camera can pick it up very clearly. There are 2 or 3 things that we have to consider in doing this. Number one, we want our patient in centric when we start. And we've got the red dot, this hinge axis centric position on the flag, so we will position our stylus pen in the hinge axis point. And then I will support the patient's head with my left hand, and I'll use my left hand at the gonial angle my thumb is on the side of the ramus. I will ask the patient to wait until I give a command to move. I will put a little bit of pressure, then I'll ask the patient to move, and at that point we'll move about 3 to 5 millimeters, going in this instance to the right, and when she's doing that I will put pressure on the ramus, pushing to the right and slightly toward the right joint. And as we do that, we'll then be measuring the immediate side shift by looking at our stylus pen. There are 2 ways we're going to measure. One is I'm going to use the stylus pen itself so that I'll look at the millimeters, measurements here. I'll move the stylus pen in and touch the flag, and you can see there's approximately 1.5 millimeters of marks showing here. So when the patient moves to the right, that stylus will move out like this. That's an exaggeration, but it will move out. And so I will measure from 1.5 millimeters to wherever the pen moves. And I'm measuring in relation to the side of the bullet here. So when it's touching the flag, well, after a second look, as it's touching the flag, we're 2 millimeters. So we're 2 millimeters from the edge of the bullet here with our millimeter marks. And so I will then ask the patient to hold right there, stay in position, don't move. Stay in position, do not move. Make sure your stylus pen is touching the flag. Now move slowly to the left, right. Stop. Okay, that was way too much. We know that there's not that much side shift. She dropped the jaw out of the joint. If you now go back. If you watch the stylus pen movement, it dropped down and then moved so that she dropped the condyle. She's getting tired. It's been a long day, so I can understand why that happened. We'll try it one more time to demonstrate it. There we go. Move right. Stop. Now, if you count the number of millimeter marks, you can see that we now see 3 millimeter marks. We started where we could see 2. Now we see 3. That means the patient has a 1 millimeter immediate side shift on the left side. Now there's one other way. Sometimes it might work better to use another approach to measure an immediate side shift, and that is using the bullet to measure it. If you look here, you can see on the bullet that there are millimeter marks also. The first mark is the 0 mark. When the bullet is all the way in against the sidearm, that's the 0 mark. So any movement that it moves away like that is how much side shift there is. And so we'll do the using the bullet technique. Now move. Stop. There we see about 1.5 millimeters, so I'm going to do it again. Hold it. Now move. Stop. That's approximately 1 millimeter. So using the bullet, we also measured approximately 1 millimeter side shift. The first thing I have to do is I have to establish a standard position for putting the axis point onto the face and at the same time eventually taking that measurement off of the face. If you have a patient laying back like this, lay her back some, move her back. If you have a patient laying back some and you put a mark on the skin and then you set the patient up, that mark changes because of gravity. The skin will move a little bit because of gravity. And so your hinge axis mark is not correct. So you have to do a standardized position every time. And that standardized position that we accept is that we set the patient up totally, so move the back of the chair up completely straight, as far as it'll go. Is that it? Okay, now, okay, I'm going to have the patient then scoot your bottom back against the chair. Feet, no, don't cross your feet or anything like that. The hair has to be totally relaxed. You can't pull on the hair because if you pull on the hair, that moves the skin. So the hair has to be completely loose. If there are any hair bows, bobby pins, anything in the hair, they have to remove it, and the hair has to be completely loose. And then I will have the patient sit up. Now it's out of the chair, that's a girl. Look straight ahead. I will come in and I'll support the back of the head. And I do it only with fingertip support, not your whole palm, because you'll move the hair and stretch the skin. So you do just fingertip touch here, and then I'll come to this point, and I have to reestablish and make sure my patient is on the hinge axis. So I'm going to control the mandible, but at the same time, I'm going to loosen the stylus pen, move it in close to the skin, not going to touch the skin, and I'm going to have the patient open and close, open and close. So I'm kind of using the skin as my flag to make sure that she's stable. Close, hold it. Do not move. Now then, Christy, you start marking. Now the graphite mark is very faint, but make sure you get one.
Okay, move it in.
You move it in, touch it, turn it a little bit, and pull back and see if you got a mark. Okay, pull it back. Okay, now we got a mark. Now I'm going to take the clutch assembly off, and this may feel a little bit tight, but we'll see. Let me know if this bothers you. Good clutch. I tell you what, let's get rid of the side arms. We're now ready to do our hinge axis facebow transfer. I want to point out to you the instrumentation that we'll need to do the hinge axis facebow transfer. We'll use the about fork assembly and this crossbar that you saw when we did our estimated facebow or our anatomical facebow and then we'll use the two side arms that we used when we did our hinge axis recording, and we'll need the hex wrench to tighten these two side arms. I think it's important that you understand exactly what happened when we took the ear bow, or the estimated facebow, and why we did some of the steps that we did. Number one, You remember that when I did the bite fork, I had the patient hold the bite fork in place by placing pink wax on the bottom of the bite fork and closing the patient into the pink wax. The important part of that is that as the patient was closed into the pink wax, I manipulated the mandible so that I placed the condyles in centric, so that when the patient closed on the pink wax, the patient was holding the bite fork against the upper teeth with the condyles seated in centric relation. That's a very, very important step. And then after we did the ear bowl, we took the ear bowl, we took off the bite fork assembly, and I placed this crossbar on. This crossbar then is used to hold the side arms when we start to take the hinge axis face bowl. Now, also, you remember that when we did the hinge axis recording, we located the hinge axis, and then we marked that hinge axis on the patient's skin. We put a mark here on each side on the patient's face that was the hinge axis point. When we made those marks, the condyle was seated in centric relation. And that's a very important step. The condyles are seated in centric when the patient's hinge axis marks are made on the patient, plus when we did our bite fork, we used the pink wax to hold the condyles in centric. If the condyles aren't in centric for the pink wax, then the condyles may be out of centric, thus the tissue would move, and our hinge axis marks on the patient's face is not truly on the hinge axis. That's why those two steps are very important and have to coordinate. Now, once we've accomplished that, we'll set up our side arms. And I usually just use the side arms as we did when we actually placed them on the patient to do the recording. I place the bullet in with the stylus pen, and I put the dull side of the stylus pen toward the patient initially, and I put it at 2 millimeter mark. It would then be placed on the patient on the side arm like this, and it would move in, and the dull side then would touch the patient's face. I don't want to start out using the point and move in and touch the patient's face because it would hurt the patient. And so it can move in and touch the patient's face with the dull point, and then we would reverse it. But first, before I did that, I would put this in the patient's mouth, and then I would look at the side arm and judge how far it is to the hinge axis point on the patient, and I would make my gross adjustments here so that I wouldn't be adjusting so much on the patient. And then I could place the side arm on the crossbar, tighten it, move it in until it touches the patient's cheek in the area of the hinge axis mark. Tighten it. Then reverse the pen so that the point is now toward the patient. And for the moment, I will put the left side on, and I'd be doing exactly the same thing. I would make gross adjustments on the left side. Once the gross adjustment is made, and I've estimated about how far it is to the hinge axis point, put it on also. Move it in until it touches the patient's cheek with the dull side of the stylus pen. Lock the side arm in place. Now reverse the stylus pen. Lock it for the moment. And then while this is on the patient, I can then move the stylus pen now in close to the skin, and I can make my anterior, posterior, and vertical adjustments as needed. Vertical adjustment as needed, and anterior, posterior adjustment as needed to set the stylus pen exactly on the hinge axis mark. Once the stylus pen is set on the hinge axis mark, I can then lock the stylus pen in position, lock the sidearm in position. This is locking the vertical. And then I would do the same thing on the left side. Loosen the pen, and then make my anterior-posterior adjustment as needed. Do the vertical as needed to get the stylus point lined up exactly on the hinge axis mark. Touch the tissue very gently. Just touch the tissue very, very gently. Lock the stylus pen. And then when I get ready to remove it all, I can then unlock this and remove the stylus pen. And this will capture. I can go right back to that same place. And that's the way I would capture the interface width. There's one other important point that I want to remind you of. You remember when we did our estimated face bow, this vertical part of the face of the bite fork assembly is our third reference point. Remember, that was lined up with the face bow so that represents or is the actual third reference point, that is orbitally. And now then, when we do our face bow, hinge axis face bow transfer, we have established 3 points. 1 point orbitally, the hinge axis point on the patient, the hinge axis point on the patient. Thus we have a axis orbital plane. We're using the actual axis of the patient, and we've established our axis orbital plane. And then, as I said, to capture the interface width, all we do now is remove the entire bullet assembly. And then we take this off of the patient, and then we would put the bullet assemblies back into the sidearms. Put them back in the sidearms. Now we can measure the interface width. The actual facial width of our patient is from the point to the point. And then, of course, we use this is our hinge axis face bow transfer. And now we can go to our mounting stand, our hinge axis mounting stand, and place this on the hinge axis mounting stand in order to mount our upper model, which would be related to the hinge axis of the patient. This is Allison is Dr. Mills' patient. Both Dr. Mills and Allison were kind enough to volunteer. Dr. Mills volunteered Allison for this procedure. And so I've been showing Dr. Mills how the AD2 equipment works, and I've now recruited him to do a little work. He's just been sitting and watching, so it's time for him to work. So he'll be doing the left side while I'm doing the right side. We've put the bite fork on. The pink wax is holding the mandible in centric relation. And now we're going to actually put the stylus pens on the hinge axis marks that we put on the patient's cheek. And so we have to reestablish the same position that we did when we put the marks on the patient's skin. That is, the patient has to move back in the chair. So sit up, move back in the chair as much as you can. Just rest the arms straight on the side. Put your face, look straight ahead, just drop your chin down. And I'm going to stabilize the head in this position. And then Dr. Mills and I will do adjustments of the sidearms to locate, to put the stylus points on the axis. Okay. Now you want to be able to move the stylus pen in and touch right on the red dot. Don't push the skin in, just touch it very gently. Once you've touched it, lock the stylus pen. That's the lower screw. Lock the stylus pen in that position. And then we'll take the entire bullet out. So that means loosen the screw on the back of the sidearm and take the entire bullet out like this. And the stylus pen is locked.
Yes.
Good. Now lean back. So by moving in and touching the skin and locking the stylus pen at that position, what we've done is capture the interface width. Later, I'll show you how we actually measure that. There's one other procedure that we have to do on the patient, and that is we're going to actually what we call a tattoo, and we're going to use a needle and some tattoo dye and actually deposit a little tattoo dye just under the surface of the skin. That way, 6 months from now, a year from now, we can still locate that hinge axis dot on the patient's face, and we don't have to go through all this procedure again. Dr. Mills is going to do the tattoo since this is on his patient, and he's using a 23 gauge lumen needle and the tattoo dye. And before we put the marks on the patient's cheek, you remember I used an alcohol sponge and I cleansed the tissue good with the alcohol sponge. When you use the needle to do the tattoo, make sure you get enough ink on the needle. But what you want to look at also is you look at the lumen of the needle and see if there's dye inside the lumen, because you can have a lot of dye on the outside of the needle, but when you prick the skin wipes that part off. So it's the amount of dye that's in the lumen that's extremely important. Okay, now we have the patient hold pressure on that for 2 or 3 minutes, and then we tell the patient, don't wash the area because you want the skin to close over. If you wash it, you can wash the dye out. So we don't want the patient washing or anything for a couple hours or so. About a year from now, if you start looking for that tattoo, you will have difficulty trying to find it. And so if you know exactly where to look, then you'll be able to find it easier. And to know where to look, we use a millimeter rule, place it in relationship to the tragus, and take a picture of the millimeter rule and the dot in relationship to the tragus.
Yeah, it's almost right on it.
This is the hinge axis mounting stand. This is used similar to how you mount the estimated face bow on your articulator, except that we're mounting the actual hinge axis point of the patient onto the articulator. And this is like our top of our articulator. The axis point here is the same as the axis on our articulator. So I can mount my hinge axis model onto this mounting stand and then transfer that model to my articulator, and I've upper model on the articulator on the true hinge axis related to the patient. And the way this is set up now, if we look at the hinge axis mounting stand, you can see that there are millimeter measurements here. This is used to measure the interface width, and we'll do this on a video and you'll see it later, but that uses to measure the interface width. We actually also use that interface width to set up the distance that our stylus pins, our hinge axis point on the patient. Where's that hinge axis point on the patient? How far away from this is it? And so these stylus pins here are adjustable. And so you move the stylus pins out until it equals the interface width on the patient, and you set your hinge axis face bow up to that distance. Now, these stylus pins, very important that they be exactly the same on both sides, and that way it centers the bat fork face bow over the mounting stand correctly. That when the stylus pins are all the way in so that the mark just shows on each side, if you measured from here to here, it would measure 122 millimeters. Generally, you think in terms of 120 millimeter distance, but what creates the difference is that there's a 1 millimeter hole here on each side. So when you set your stylus pins in here, that reduces it by 2 millimeters, one here, thus it's 120 millimeters. The top of the mounting stand works kind of like the articulator. You would put your mounting plate on here, and then when you get ready to mount, and you have your bite fork assembly would be here, and you need to support the bite fork so that when you put your model on, it doesn't displace the bite fork. The weight of the model doesn't displace the bite fork. And so these plastic rings are used to do that, and it depends on the length of the maxilla as to which ring you need, but it would fit right over here, and you would fill this with plaster to support the bite forks in. And these notches are for rubber bands. You can hook a rubber band here, come up to here, and that then controls the setting dimension of the stone, mounting stone. Plaster, mounting stone, all expands as it hardens. And for accuracy, you want to control the expansion, and so rubber bands can be used to control that expansion to keep the dimension more accurate. These holes are references that if you don't have time to mount the model now, you can take the bite fork off with the plaster, and you can bring it back at a later date, and it sets right in that exact spot, and then you can mount your upper model. And that's basically how the hinge axis mounting stand is used. The patient has been dismissed. Now then we have to do our lab procedures. The first thing that we want to do is to establish the interface width. To do that, I have to put the stylus pins back in, and then go back in all the way, that is, the bullet inserts until it stops. That's the way it was when we took it off the patient. You remember, on the patient, the stylus pins touched the hinge axis marks on the patient and just touched the skin. So from this point to this point is the interface width. I'm going to measure that interface width, and it measures to 157 minus 20 millimeters means it's 137. So her interface width is 137 millimeters. Now another way to measure that, and this will double check it, is to use our hinge axis mounting stand, and you see the numbers here, and you set one stylus pin even with this part of the hinge axis mounting stand, and then see where the point is of the other one. This measures also about 137 millimeters. So her interface width is 137 millimeters. So we go to our patient records. We can see that it says interface width, the date, and the actual millimeter measurement, 7 millimeters. So we record the patient's interface width, 137 millimeters. And the next thing we want to do, we're going to take the flags off, our recording, off of the, and put them on the patient record card, and you can see the place to place the flags. So we'll take the right side off. So we place the patient's flags on the patient record card. You remember that we measured the immediate side shift on both the right and left sides, and the immediate side shift was 1.0 millimeters. So we place that information. Okay, now I've recorded the immediate side shift, right and left sides, on 421/12. Now it's asking for the angle of the eminence, right and left sides. So we have to measure now the angle of the eminence. Okay, now this line is the axis orbital plane. Here was the hinge axis mark, centric relation, and the patient's recording. Notice how all of the recording lines, all movements, basically superimpose. This tells us that the patient was well stabilized and that there's no muscle dysfunction or anything. So it's a very good recording, good clean recording. Now the angle of the eminence is actually the measurement of this space between the axis orbital plane and the actual recording of the patient. So I'm going to use the graph I just showed you to establish and measure the angle of the eminence. Now I've superimposed this point on the hinge axis point on the flag, and I've superimposed the 6 or 7 millimeters of the curvature on the graph paper on the patient's tracing. And then I'll project the axis orbital plane across to here, and you see the axis orbital plane actually lines up with this line right here. This line is 34 degrees, this line is 42, so that's 38 degrees. That line is 38 degrees. So on the left side, the angle of the eminence is 38 degrees. So I'll record that on the patient's chart. And now we have to do the right side. This one measures 42 degrees. So the right angle of the eminence is 42, the left is 38. And we have to now set our mount our upper model on the hinge axis mounting stand. The hinge axis mounting stand, I've already put a mounting plate on. When this is set on 0, it's 120 millimeters. That's from the depth of the hole here, which is 1 millimeter, to the depth of the hole on the other side, which is 1 millimeter. So that distance is 120 millimeters. The patient's interface width was 137 millimeters. So if I subtract 120 from 137, I get 17 millimeters. Now, if I divide that by 2, because I'm going to put half of this on one side and half of it on the other side. So if I divide that by 2, you get 8.5 millimeters. So I will move each of these stylus pins out 8.5 millimeters. See, the big marks are 5 millimeters. So if I go in, there's 8. So I come a little bit more past the 8 and lock it. Now I look to see if this little bit of space here is about the same as the space here. They look about the same. Now then, I'm going to see how my measurements were. So I'm going to put the stylus pin in the hole on the left, and then look at the right side. It looks like it's about 1 millimeter over. Spring it out, put it in the hole. There's no play back and forth. Therefore, that's the measurement I need. Now then, I turn this over. This pin has to be completely out of the way and touches here. That's the third. Remember, this is the third reference point right here. Remember when we did that on the patient and the bite fork assembly? That established his third reference point, orbitally. We got a hinge point, so we've got 3 points. 1, 2, 3. 3 points make a plane. So we are mounting these models, this upper model, on the axis orbital plane. And that's the way it's all established. Now the next thing I have to do is that you do not put a model on this bite fork, because if you put a model on, the weight of the plaster may cause the bite fork to be deflected slightly down. So you must support this bite fork before you put a model on it. And so we look at it and decide how much plaster am I going to have to build up from here to here to support this bite fork. And it looks like it's going to require the big ring here, the thickest ring. So I'm going to take a little aquaphor, put inside this ring. To protect the instruments, a very thin coating of silicone spray will help protect the instrument. So I'm going to put a little silicone spray in this area here. we're going to put the whip mix mounting stone in the first amount I vibrate into place so that I get it into the indentations. Just making sure now I get the stone underneath the bite fork, supporting the bite fork good. If you want to bring a little bit up on the bite fork, it's okay, except make sure you don't get it where the teeth are. Mounting stone is hard now, so we know our bite fork is supported, and I can go ahead and put my model onto the bite fork. So I'll put my upper model on the bite fork, make sure it's seated in the compound correctly, and then I'll close it down, and I'm going to take a look and see how much space there is, how much plaster do I need to mix up to mount my upper model to the hinge axis mounting stand. So there's not too much plaster needed. As always, though, you make sure that you have water, that the model is wet also. So I'm going to get a little water and put on the model first and make sure I vibrate it into the undercuts so I have good retention. And there may be some tendency for it to be pushed forward. So once I know that I've got enough stone, mounting stone, holding the model in place, I don't try to add more. I'll make it pretty later. I'll fill in all the area and make it pretty later. So now we just have to wait on that to harden. After you add the plaster and close the articulator down, hold some pressure during the initial set of the plaster, that or put some rubber bands. This is to counteract the expansion of the plaster. It's hard, that's good. Now, this is a split cast model, so I have to be very careful how I handle it. If I try to just pick up the entire model and don't just open it up, I may break the model. So I have to be very careful. The first thing I want to do is just hold the model and lift it and open it, and open the mounting stand, leaving the model in place. Now I'm going to check the model, see that it's seated good. Now I'm going to close the hinge axis mounting stand again and see if I split cast check. In other words, I'm asking myself, did I move that upper model when I mounted it? The only way I know for sure is to close it down. I seated the model again, take it out and reseat it in the compound bite. Get it seated exactly in the compound bite, the AccuBites, and then close it down slowly. Close it very slowly and watch, and make sure the upper model doesn't move. And it came together perfectly, no movement of the model. So I split cast check the accuracy of the mounting of the upper model. So it's just a double check procedure that you can do. So now I can take the model out of the, and I'm going to keep from dropping this, I'm going to take the model off. We need to personalize our articulator settings now for our patient. The articulator at this moment in time has 1.5 millimeter analogs on right and left side. Well, our patient, we measured on our patient, she had a 1.0 side shift. So we have to change the analogs now and put the 1.5 0 analogs in the place of these 1.5 analogs. So I'll have to replace the analogs. To do that, I've got to take the articulator apart, loosen the 2 screws here, the 2 hex screws in the back, and now I can slip the analog out and put the left analog in, 1.0. Now when you put it in, you make sure you get it all the way seated against the side of the articulator, the base of the articulator. Also, we want to set our angle of the eminence while we're doing this. And on the left side, the angle of the eminence measured 38 degrees. So I'll set my analog at 38 degrees. Just a little bit below the 37 mark. Tighten them both real good. Take out the 1.5 on the right side. Put the 1.0 on. And the setting is 42. Eminence is 42. So we'll set it at just a little above the 45 mark. Okay, now our articulator is set for this particular patient. And I will put a mounting plate on the lower. Remember, you put the mounting plate on with your hand. And let the screw just hold it. Now to put it back together, seat your condyles first in the fossa box. And then close it. Put your centric lock on. Attach your side shift activators. Open and close. Good. Side shift. Put the centric lock back on. Centric latch, be sure you push down on the centric latch, pull down on the pin. Now then, we're going to get ready to mount our lower model. And mounting the lower model, remember I told you using the articulator, when we mount an upper model, we want the upper member parallel to the lower member so that that green mark is even with the top of the articulator. When we mount a lower model, though, we want to allow for the thickness of the wax. Remember, the power centric bite that we did has a thickness to it. So we want to actually elongate this pin here. And I've standardized it so that I always use plus 3 millimeters to mount all my lower models. So the red mark you see on the incisive guide pin there is at plus 3 millimeters. So I move that anterior pin so that the red mark is even with the top of the articulator. So what I've done is increase the distance here by 3 millimeters at the pin. And we'll be ready in a moment to mount our lower model. Now I'm going to put the upper model on the articulator. Now I want to check my wax bite. If I look very carefully at my upper wax bite, or the bite of the upper teeth, you can see these little dots here. That's where it was touching soft tissue. Soft tissue, this would depress the soft tissue. In the mouth and the cast, though, that's hard tissue. It will not depress. So that if you try to put your wax bite on the model, it doesn't fit solidly. There's a little movement. because the wax is touching the hard cast on the lingual surface. So I've got to cut away the wax to make sure that it clears all the hard tissue on the lingual. You only want cusp tip indexing, so I have to cut away down to almost the incisal edges. And so I have to quite a bit of trimming I have to do on this wax bite before we can use it. But always check, like I'm doing now, looking from the lingual, and it's very difficult to see. Am I clearing soft tissue? Well, I can't tell for sure. So I'm going to make really sure I clear by cutting away the excess wax. Okay. I've used a sharp scalpel, and I've cut away the blue wax all in this area here, and a little bit on the labial of the canines. And I also cut some on the lower incisors. Cut away the wax in here so the indentations wouldn't be quite so deep. And now I want to put it back on the model and see if I'm clearing the soft tissue good. I'm definitely clearing the soft tissue. And the wax doesn't rock. I can try to move it back and forth, it doesn't move. So I know that I've cleared the soft tissue good. Now I'm going to look at the posterior section. And when you cut the wax, the excess wax, you also, quite frequently, the wax will take an indentation of the central fossa area. You'll cut away some of that central fossa area, leave just cusp tips. So you cut away the central fossa area so that only cusp tips are seating. The same way on the lower, cut away the central fossa area here. And now I have just cusp tips. So I think my wax bites are prepared okay. And now we'll get ready to mount our lower model. And you remember the mounting stand now, we're going to use the extensions here that hold the side shift activators in. The upper part of the articulator goes over the mounting stand, the base of the mounting stand, and we slip it in like that. Now I want to adjust the position of the upper model so that when I add plaster it won't fall off. So I have to change the pin, the posterior pin, which allows, and in a moment when I put the lower model on, I want the base of the lower model parallel to the floor. Then when I add plaster to it, the plaster will not fall off. And so I'll put my wax bites on the upper.
There we go.
You have to make sure that the posterior and anterior sections of the wax do not touch. If they touch, you have to take a scalpel and cut away the area that they touch. That may prevent the wax from seating onto the teeth correctly.
Great.
Get the lower model. Notice I have retention grooves cut in the lower model. Now I'm going to put the lower model on and take a look at it. I'm going to seat it with a little bit of pressure. You can see now the base of the lower model is parallel to the countertop, so when I add plaster it won't fall off. And now I have to know how much plaster to add, so I close the articulator and I look and I see the space and how much plaster I've got to add. So that's quite a bit, and so I have to be a little careful how I add and the plaster. If you don't wet the base of the lower model, or any model, when you add plaster, the dry model takes water out of the plaster that you're adding, and thus the union is not as strong then. So you don't want your model taking water out of the plaster, mounting plaster that you're going to add. Otherwise the union will not be as strong. I want to take a little bit of the excess water off the lower model base. And then I'll start adding first to the lower model. And I want to kind of make sure it works into the retention grooves that I have. And then add a little bit to the lower mounting plate. And again, work it into the retention grooves. Now when you do a lower model like this, amount of space. As I close the articulator, it'll tend to push the excess plaster forward. So I have to be ready to kind of catch the excess plaster and wipe it off and not let it drop down onto the models. So it's a little bit of a problem you have to watch for. I'm not going to try to add any more at this time. After the plaster is nice and hard, and I can take the models off and hold them in my hand, I'll add more plaster and make them very beautiful so that they can show good. If you start trying to add plaster now, what you quite frequently will do is you'll move the lower model. So you don't want to take a chance on moving the lower model just to make it look good. So just wait, and you can add the plaster later. Now the mounting stone on the lower model is set, so I'm going to take it off. You just lift up the articulator, move it to the back, and invert it. And the next thing we have to do is to make sure that we mounted our lower model correctly and did not move it. So again, we're going to use our split cast technique to make that judgment. So first I'm going to open the articulator and take off the wax bites. I'm going to move the incisal guide pin out of the way. And put the posterior pin to support the top of the articulator. Now what we find works easier is to put the wax bites on the upper model and then close the lower model into the wax bites that are on the upper model. So I'm going to place the wax bites again on the upper model. Make sure they're seated good. And then I'm going to take an articulator, hold the upper model with my fingers, and I'm going to close the articulator into the wax bites. I'm going to invert the articulator. Hold the upper model, open the articulator, make sure the upper model is seated in the wax good, and then I'm going to close the articulator very slowly, holding only the pin here so that I can feel good, and I can also watch to see if it comes together without my upper model moving. So it comes together perfectly. There was no movement of the upper model. So I have split cast checked the accuracy of the mounting of my lower model. And so that is the way you use a split cast. We first split cast the mounting of the upper model to make sure the upper model didn't move. Now we're using the same split cast to check the accuracy of the mounting of our lower model to this set of wax bites. And it did not move. So the mounting is good to this set of wax bites. This is a good mounting. Okay, if you remember when I did the wax bites, I did a series of posterior wax bites with the varying thicknesses. This was one thickness of wax, this was two thicknesses, and this was three thicknesses of wax. In other words, the mandible in the thicker piece of wax here, the mandible is farther open. The second two layers, the mandible is closed some. And in the thin layer, the mandible is closed even more. So if all three of these split cast check, then that means that my mounting I did with a power centric bite is accurate. That means that I captured the arc of closure of the mandible and I transferred the axis correctly. So this is a very important step to check the accuracy of my mounting, because I will use this mounting then to make all my treatment decisions on the patient, so you want it to be accurate. I'm going to use the thick one first. So this is three thicknesses of wax. It means the mandible is open more. Make sure it's seated good. Now very slowly close. Watch and feel. So the thick one checks. That is, I captured the position of the mandible in a fairly open position. Now I use the two thicknesses of wax. The mandible is closing a little more now. Good. And I'll use the thin one now. Good. Now I have another power-centric bite that I did, but in looking at the wax bite, I don't like the shape because in trying to locate exactly how to put it on the upper posterior teeth, it was difficult to figure out exactly where it goes. But let's check it and see if it split cast checks. I do know though that the first power-centric bites that I use to mount these models, I will mount all the other models in this case using those wax bites, because I have verified the accuracy of those wax bites by using different thicknesses of wax and split cast checking this mounting. They all three thicknesses, varying thicknesses, split cast check, so I know it's an accurate mounting for this patient. So all the other models I have for this patient will be mounted with using that first set of power-centric bites. But let's see if this one will check. See, I'm even having trouble trying to locate, there it is, locate exactly where it fits on the model, because the indentations of the teeth weren't that clear. But I got it. Let's close. Invert it. Seat the wax, seat the model in the wax good. And now we'll close it down very slowly. Now it's touching there. So that's an inaccurate set of wax bites. It doesn't match the ones that I've already proven are correct. So you see how it doesn't come together. Now maybe I've got it seated wrong, so I'm going to try it one more time. Be closer this time. Now then, it's the first time I showed you just now, I didn't have the wax bites seated good. I could tell when I seated them a second time, they seated much more clearly. And so now then you can see that it's getting closer, but now it's touching. And you see it's still not seated. See that? See the space here? And I can feel that it's touching the upper model. So that is an inaccurate set of wax bites as compared to the actual mounting. That's the reason you use split cast checking and verify, having a technique to verify the accuracy of your work. So this wax bite is no good. Now, let's assume for a moment, let's assume that I actually mounted these models with these wax bites. Then when I started to use all these other wax bites, none of them would split cast check. So it's a little strange that I use one set of wax bites and then all my other wax bites will not split cast check with that one, with this one. So what I would have to do is take the lower model off, come to another set of wax bites, and remount the lower model using a new set of wax bites. And then I would verify the accuracy of the mounting by split cast checking with all the other wax bites. So that's one reason I took 2 power centric bites, just in case I didn't get split cast checking with one and I did with the other. So these will be thrown away. They're no good. Now I know how to mount all my other lower models. Okay, I have used some Scotch tape, and I taped the split cast together with Scotch tape just to be able to demonstrate something for you. Later on, when we actually start working with the models, we'll use super glue and glue them together, and or use stone and plaster them together so they're very firm. So the Scotch tape is a temporary measure. I first want to locate the first contact area, so I have some blue articulating paper, and I'm going to put it in the posterior area and close it down and kind of tap it a couple of times. Even though the patient said it was on the left side, one time when I worked on her, she said it was on the right. I think it's on the right. Now then, if we look at the occlusal surface of the upper teeth, you can see a green mark here and here. So we're on the posterior, on the first molar and the posterior, the most posterior tooth here. And then we look at all the rest of the teeth, and there are no marks at all. So the only contact is on the right side. So if I close the articulator to first contact, let me get this pen out of the way so you can photograph it. So if I close it down to first contact, this is what you have. Notice that there's an open bite all the way around. The teeth don't come together all the way around. The only contact is in this area here. Now we can see what she's done to her tooth. Now remember, she's a young lady, young, healthy person, but let's look what she's done to her teeth already. She's lucky that Dr. Mills is her dentist, because look at the wear patterns. Look at this tooth here. Let me get another set of models so you can see this more clearly. Look at the lower teeth. Look, she's actually worn a hole. Look at that hole there in that cusp. She's worn the cusp down and wearing a hole in it. It's the same way. This cusp is practically gone. There's wear facets on all these cusps over here. Wear facets here. So very, very clearly, she, as a young lady, I'm going to guess 23, 24 years old, look how much she's already worn her teeth. Now, let's say that she was not observed by a dentist who recognized attrition as being a problem. What would she look like at age 50? What would those teeth look like 30 years from now? I'm speculating, but I've seen enough of it to feel fairly assured of what I'm saying. She would have worn off all the occlusal surfaces of posterior teeth. They would be almost as flat as this tabletop. Now, what happens when the patient wears away the occlusal surfaces of the posterior teeth? They close the vertical dimension. What happens to the face when they close the vertical dimension? The muscles are not working correctly. They begin to get lines and folds. They begin to look, if they're 40 years old, they look 60 years old because of the closed vertical dimension and all the lines that it creates in the face from the fact that the muscles aren't working correctly. And besides the possibility that she would have really damaged her joints over time because of the stress she'd be putting on her joints all time. When you wear your teeth, you're grinding on them, you're stressing the ligaments in the joint. You stress the ligaments, the disc is eventually displaced. The disc is displaced, you begin to get degenerative joint disease. So this is a process that can grow as you grow older. So she's very lucky that she's Dr. Mill's patient. What he'll be able to do is, I'm pretty sure, is he'll be able just to do some equilibration on the posterior teeth, some negative equilibration, coronoplasty, and he'll do positive coronoplasty, build up the worn areas, and get the anterior teeth coupled and working together properly. And she then will be in great shape probably the rest of her life. Let's see if I can demonstrate one other thing. I'm going to see if I can move the articulator and show you what a balancing interference is. So I unlocked the centric and the centric latch, and I'm going to move the patient into left or right working. And when we move the teeth into right working and we look at the left side, you can see how the posterior teeth, look at the first and second molars, they're on the left side, and you can see that they're rubbing. That's the way where facets develop. And if we go into left working and look at right balancing or orbiting, again you can see the posterior contact on the second molar, the lingual cusp of the upper second molar hitting the buccal cusp of the lower second molar. So she has the balancing interferences. She has an open bite in the front, so there's no anterior disclusion when she tries to go into protrusive, and the posterior teeth are rubbing when she goes into, see the second molar? The cat rubs when she tries to go into protrusive. That's the way you wear your teeth, and that's the way you damage the joints over time.